This is the new 2021 Rolls-Royce Ghost, and it is the latest Rolls-Royce luxury sedan. Now, the Ghost has been out for several years now, but it's just been redesigned for the 2021 model year with new features and new styling and new everything else. And today, I'm going to take you on a tour of it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my new online enthusiast car auction website for modern cars from the 1980s and up with daily auctions of cool cars. If you're looking to sell or buy a cool car from the 80s and up, do it on Cars and Bids. We have amazing variety of cool cars from the modern era. Check it out at carsandbids.com. I've borrowed this new Ghost from O'Gara San Diego, which is the Rolls-Royce dealership here in San Diego. O'Gara has all of the latest Rolls-Royce models, of course, including the new Ghost, which is available to order now for deliveries later this year or early next year. You can check out O'Gara San Diego by clicking the link in the description below. So let's talk Ghost. The Ghost first came out for the 2010 model year, and it was based on the BMW 7 Series, which makes sense because BMW owns Rolls-Royce. For years, the Ghost was highly successful as Rolls-Royce's entry-level model for people who couldn't quite swing a Phantom. But the outgoing Ghost was starting to get old in terms of design and technology. Enter the 2021 Rolls-Royce Ghost. It's been completely redesigned from the ground up, and it no longer shares any architecture with BMW. It has now moved to a dedicated Rolls-Royce platform. It is longer, wider, and larger than before, and it now has standard all-wheel drive. It still has a V12, makes 563 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque. Even though this is a stately luxury sedan, it'll do 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. And of course, the Ghost is expensive. The new model will have a starting price of over $300,000. That's a lot of money for entry level, but of course the Ghost is only entry level for Rolls-Royce. For anybody else, it would be the flagship model wafting down the road in pure luxury. Unfortunately, I can't experience that wafting just yet. Since the Ghost was just revealed, I can't yet drive it, but I will take you on a thorough tour of the Ghost and show you all of the quirks and features of the latest Rolls-Royce luxury sedan. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the Ghost with getting in, and that means we must talk about the key, which is purple. Or at least the back of the key is purple. This confounded me. Why is the key to a gray car purple? And the answer is that's the color they use for all the accents in this particular Ghost. So this little stripe going down the side of the car, also purple. Open up the door, climb inside, you will see the same purple as the stitching color in all of the seats. All the accent stitching is matching purple. And if you look up, you will also see it in this accent in the middle of the seats, again, purple to match the color on the key. It's even in the door panel. You can see it's all white except for this purple piece in the storage pocket. So there are purple accents all throughout the car, and that's why the key is purple. Stradman would be proud. And next up, before I climb in, actually, I want to talk about some of the changes on the outside that make the Ghost look new. Now, this car is fully redesigned. It's not just a facelift, but it can kind of look like one because Rolls-Royces don't usually change dramatically. That's pretty rare. They usually sort of evolve. And so this is an evolution. One of the biggest changes comes to the front, where you have just reworked headlights. Everything's a little bit sharper up here. Probably the most noticeable difference is this lower grille, which is larger and frankly looks a little bit more aggressive. One interesting item I noticed is the Spirit of Ecstasy is a little bit different. In the previous Ghost, it was mounted on a panel that was kind of shared with the grille, and the hood was behind it. Now the Spirit comes out of a hole that's actually punched into the hood. So when you open up the hood, it kind of opens around the Spirit of Ecstasy as opposed to behind it like before. So you have to be a little careful. In some situations, the Spirit will actually lower when you open up the hood, so it gives you more room to to reach over and work on it, but that's another little change to the front of the new Ghost. And next up, it's a similar situation around back, an evolution, not a revolution. You have completely new lights back here and kind of a new general look, and the car looks bigger than before, which makes sense because it is. Like I said, it's larger, longer, wider in every dimension than the previous Ghost, and frankly, it looks more stately than the prior Ghost. The last one seemed a little bit more restrained than this. This is now a little bit more Rolls-Royce-y and luxurious, if you ask me. But like I said, no major changes on the outside, just sort of some minor tweaks and improvements to make sure you're aware there's a new Ghost. And next up, we climb inside the Ghost. And one of the very first things you notice when you climb in here is the carpeting, which is fluffy, very fluffy. You touch it and it just feels so luxurious, so nice. Now, I've been in old Rolls-Royce models that had fluffy carpeting when it was new, and it kind of degenerates over time, and it's nowhere near that fluffy in 20 years. But right now, as a new car, this is the most luxurious carpeting available. Now, the other thing you notice when you get in here, something I just showed you, the door closes automatically. This has been true of Rolls-Royce models for a long time, although they've now moved the door closer switch. It used to be to the left of the steering wheel. Now it's in the center. You can see it looks kind of like a window switch, except with a door on it and an arrow pointing to which door it controls. You pull the switch and you can close the door. Now, unfortunately, you cannot open the door this way, only close it, but having power closing doors is still better than nothing, better than doing it yourself, for sure. And next up, another benefit when you climb inside the new Ghost is the headliner, which is the Starry Sky headliner, of course. This has become a Rolls-Royce signature, and this car has it, obviously. You can control the Starry headliner with a couple of buttons on the ceiling. The one on the left turns it on or off, and the one on the right is actually a switch that dims or brightens it depending on your current Starry headliner mood. But the stars don't quite stop there. Over on the passenger side of the dashboard, when the car is off, it just looks black, like most dashboards, frankly. But when the car is on, this reveals itself to be a screen. It says Ghost, and it's surrounded by stars, which is a very classy look. You can't like do anything with this. It's not a touchscreen, it doesn't change, but it does look nice, better than your typical boring passenger side dashboard area. And next up, an item that you have in the new Ghost that you also had in the old Ghost, and basically every Rolls-Royce model, is the sheer quality of this interior. Everything in here is beautiful. The materials are fantastic. The wood, it's all really nice. But you expect that from a Rolls-Royce. Of course, it's going to have nice stuff inside. What I'm more impressed by is the little nice details that maybe you wouldn't expect or you wouldn't even think of, but they do. For example, the rear view mirror control is not some plastic thing, but it's this nice aluminum joystick that feels good and has nice weight to it. This is probably a pretty expensive piece, and you'll only touch it like once every few months, but they made it nice because that's what you do at this price point. Next up, here's another good example of this, the climate controls. You have these little dials that can adjust the fan speed, and you turn them and that's what it does. Pretty simple, but the cool part is they are wrapped in leather around the edges. Rolls-Royce knows you will be touching these dials frequently to change the climate control fan speed, and so they make the touch point leather. This car has leather wrapped climate control dials. That is pretty impressive. And by the way, right below those climate control dials, you still have the weird Rolls-Royce blue-red temperature dials. Instead of having a temperature display screen like most modern cars, you just move these dials over and that adjusts your air temperature, blue and red. This is kind of a throwback to old Rolls-Royce models, which also had this. It's kind of strange to see. But anyway, another nice high-quality little detail touch in here. On the door panel, you have this Spirit of Ecstasy embossed into the door panel, beautiful in the leather, a place where nobody's really going to look, and if it hadn't been there, no one would care, but it is there because in a car like this, it's all about the details. Now, I will say one drawback to this interior that I found in terms of quality is the shifter. I have never liked this column shifter. It looks like an old Ford pickup, and it is not a very high quality item. You touch it, it feels flimsy. This is, to me, the only real quality drawback in this interior. It's just a shame it's on a piece that you touch every single time you drive the car. Now in the area of the shifter, of course, we have all the screens here. I'm not going to get into the technology in this car. I've covered a lot of this tech in the new Rolls-Royce Phantom and the new Rolls-Royce Cullinan, and I'll link those videos in the description below. The one thing I do want to mention, this car still has a power reserve dial. You can see instead of a tachometer, it goes from 0 to 100. That basically lets you know how much power you have left to use. So if you're flooring it, it'll go all the way to 0 because you're using 100% of the car's power. And if you're just wafting along, it'll stay right around 100 because you have about that percentage of power remaining. And there is also one technology item I want to cover in the center screen, and that would be the Spirit of Ecstasy. Because like in other Rolls-Royce models, the screen allows you to raise or lower the Spirit of Ecstasy. That's the Rolls-Royce hood ornament. You can raise or lower it from the screen. You press raise and it rises up. You press lower and it retreats into the hood, and then you don't see it anymore. I guess the theory here is you can be just a little more subtle if you want to. You drive this thing to a business meeting, you don't want people realizing you have a Rolls-Royce. You can put the Spirit of Ecstasy down, even though the rest of the car is still pretty obvious. There's also an automatic function in the Spirit of Ecstasy section of the infotainment screen where the Spirit will automatically lower every time you get out and lock the car. Then when you get back in and unlock it, it raises up so it can be up while you're driving along. Next up, another amazing piece of attention to detail in this car is the center controller for the infotainment system. Nothing unusual here except you have the Spirit of Ecstasy logo in the middle, and when you move the controller around like a dial, the Spirit of Ecstasy stays up. Now a lot of cars, they would just make it easy. You turn the dial, the Spirit turns to, it works. But in this car, they wanted the Spirit of Ecstasy to always point up, so it stays fixed and the dial moves around it. An excellent piece of attention to detail, and that mimics what happens on the wheels. You can see the RR logo is weighted on the wheels, so it is always facing up, never turned over when you park the car when you're driving along, so there is never any question that it is a Rolls-Royce. And next up, we move on to the back seat in the new Ghost, which is, of course, a wonderful place to spend time. You get in and again you have the fluffy floor mats, which just feel so wonderful and comfortable and soft and luxurious. You have a lot more than that back here though. On the ceiling, like I mentioned before, you have the starry headliner, and back here you can also control it just like in front. You have the same button to turn it on or off, and then next to that you have the same switch to brighten or dim the starry headliner depending on your current mood. Next up, here's another luxury feature back here. You don't just have headrests, you have headrest pillows, which are wonderfully plush. They feel fantastic, and of course they are trimmed in that same purple that I showed you from the stitching and the trim, and of course the key, and so you can just lie your head back on this wonderfully soft pillow. Next up, another benefit back here, even though this is a bench seat, this center console folds up or down, the seats still have individual controls so you can move them forward or backward. They don't go all the way in any direction, but you can kind of recline it, move it up, down, just to make yourself feel a little bit more comfortable if that's what you're looking for. But the best party trick back here is undoubtedly the rear screen. First off, take a look back here. You can see there is no rear screen. Ah, but there is. You press this little button on the back of the front seat, and then automatically a tray table folds down and a screen comes out and faces you, and now you have full access to a previously hidden rear screen. Now, before I discuss this screen, let's talk about this tray table for a second. You can see it has the same fine wood material as the wood up front on the dashboard. Looks absolutely beautiful, and if you don't want to use the screen, you can turn the screen off, just have the tray table down, and then you can eat your lunch or put a laptop on it or whatever. You can use it as kind of a picnic table. But let's say you do want the screen. The screen is pretty impressive. It is a large rear seat screen, and it is a touch screen, and you can use it to see various different items. You can change the media, the radio, that sort of thing. You can enter a navigation destination and send it to the front seat. You can see the current status of the car, the speed, where you're going. All of that sort of stuff can be done in this screen. Now, I went into greater detail about these rear screens in my review of the new Rolls-Royce Phantom, which I will link below, but suffice it to say they are very capable and you can do a lot with them. And even though they are touch screens, you don't have to touch them if you don't want. There is a controller in the center. You press this little silver button and this wood panel rises up and reveals the screen controller, and then you can use that controller to adjust your screen if for whatever reason you don't want to use it as a touchscreen. You want to just sit here and not reach all the way to the screen. well, you can do that. This is, after all, a luxury vehicle. And when you're done with the screen, of course, it's not like you have to put it away manually. Instead, just press that same button you push to unfurl the screen, and it will go back into its home automatically and conceal itself completely from the world until you want to use the screen again. A very nice luxury feature, automatic hidden power rear seat screens. But anyway, I want to go back to the center console for a second. I showed you the controller in here. Now in the panel right behind the controller, you just have storage, nothing unusual there. But in the panel behind this, between the seats, you pull on this leather loop and it reveals a compartment. That is a refrigerator, and you can put stuff back there if you want to keep it cold while you're driving along. I guess the thinking is champagne bottles or whatever if you want to celebrate in the back of your Rolls-Royce. But you can throw whatever you want back there and keep it cool on your drives. Now, next up, a couple of other rear seat things worth mentioning. One is these back doors. Once again, you can close them automatically. The button is mounted on this pillar here. It says door. You push it and the door closes. Unfortunately, once again, you can't open the door automatically, but we'll take just closing it. That still feels very luxurious. Now on the door panel, it seems pretty straightforward, but there is one interesting control I was surprised to see. You have the power window switch, and right above that, there's a dial, unlabeled. So what is that for? Well, it turns out that controls the stereo volume, and if you move that dial up or down, you turn the radio volume up or down as well. Kind of an interesting placement, but I guess it makes sense when you think about it. If you're sitting back here with your hands on your armrests, it's right within reach of your finger, so it makes sense. Still kind of strange to see it. There's also one on the other side, so both rear passengers have access to adjust the volume from the back. And next up, we climb out of the new Ghost, where there are a couple of items worth mentioning back here. One is that the rear door contains an umbrella. You can see it says umbrella. You push this little silver button and the umbrella pops out, and then when you're getting out of the car, or when your chauffeur is getting out of the car, they can put up the umbrella, and so you never get wet when you're climbing out on a rainy day. But to me, an even cooler touch back here, these are power-operated doors, and they're not just power with those buttons on the inside, you can also automatically close them from the outside. You just tap the door handle in the right place, and then the door automatically closes and latches itself. It's not that difficult to close a door, of course, but if you spend over $300,000 on a luxury car, maybe it does that for you. By the way, did you notice that umbrella isn't just any old umbrella, black? Instead, it perfectly matches the color of the interior of this car, white with purple accents, because of course it does. Rolls-Royce would do nothing less. Another great example of attention to detail in this car. And next up, we move on to the trunk of the new Ghost, which is, of course, power operated, no surprise. You get back here and you can see the trunk is massive, although it's more like long than it is wide, but it's still huge and of course carpeted everywhere, including the inside of the trunk lid. It's all carpeting back here, another thing you'd expect at this price point. One interesting trunk detail, you can see the hump in the center. That is of course where the refrigerator is. You have to make some concessions if you want a refrigerator in your Rolls-Royce. Makes sense. By the way, one thing I really like about the trunk, of course, it closes automatically. If you look at the button that closes it, you can see it has a diagram of a car with the trunk open, and not just any car, but clearly a Rolls-Royce. I love the fact that they made distinctive Rolls-Royce trunk closer diagrams. Another little attention to detail piece that you get when you spend this kind of money on a car. And next up, we move under the hood. And like I said before, the hood has this cutout to avoid the spirit of ecstasy. So when you open it, it clears, just barely. But you open up the hood and you can see this car's engine, a massive V12. 563 horsepower, 627 pound-feet of torque, 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds, and big respect to Rolls-Royce for going with a V12. In this age of turbocharged V6s and turbo V8s to save fuel for regulation's sake, Rolls-Royce is like, no. Our cars have V12s. It is simply what you do. And so they've done it. And it is a beautiful engine, or at least a beautiful engine cover. And so that's a thorough tour of the new 2021 Rolls-Royce Ghost. This car goes on sale at the end of the year, and I should be able to drive it right around then. But for now, I hope you enjoyed the tour, your most comprehensive look yet at all of the quirks and features of the latest Rolls-Royce.